My name is Ajit Sahi. I am a Hindu myself by birth. I was raised a Hindu. I lived in India for more than 50 years of my life before coming to the United States. So what's going on in India is very personal for me. I was born and raised. Because I am a Hindu, I'm part of the 80% of the people. Even the white people are not 80% in America. I'm from a religion in India that is 80%. The minorities, religious minorities, are 20%. And of course, in a country the size of India, that's still a lot. In India, we say the Indian Christians are only 3%. But that only 3% means they are more than almost 5 million. Actually, some of my Christian friends who work on the ground say that many of the Christian community members are undercounted in the census. They're probably more than that. The Muslims in India are 250 million. They are the second largest population of Muslims anywhere in the world outside of Indonesia. Indonesia is the largest number of Muslims. The second largest is in India. Not even Pakistan, not even Bangladesh, which is the third and the fourth largest population of Muslims, have as many Muslim people. So this is a country that is not only truly multicultural, multi-religious, multi-ethnic. In India, there are 16 official languages, 16. If you take the currency note, the equivalent of the dollar in India, it's called a rupee, the denomination is written on that rupee in 16 languages. I don't speak 15 of them, okay? It's so deeply multicultural, so deeply multi-ethnic. And when I grew up, it was impossible to find, yes, of course, there was violence in society, there was inequity, there were all kinds of things. But I was growing up in the 1970s, and I came of age in the 1980s. And throughout the 1970s and 1980s, despite violence in society, despite the law enforcement agencies in India being absolutely atrocious, the core of society, the core of the people of India was not so sectarian. Many of you may relate with this. Because I'm a Hindu, I'm from India, there are WhatsApp groups, family WhatsApp groups. It amazes me, it absolutely astonishes me to see two things. One, how much of fake news is consumed by my family members in India. It's unbelievable, absolutely unbelievable. And two, my cousins, who I never saw, I never heard that kind of absolute bigotry, that kind of language that is now deployed in family WhatsApp groups. You will be surprised to know that in the imagination of the Hindu people who are being fed this fake news on a daily basis, it is the Hindus who are the victims in India and not the minorities who are the victims in India. For them, Modi is a savior. Modi is saving them. You know, I woke up this morning, and of course, because this is my job, this is my bread and butter, this is what puts food on the table. So my phone is set to alerts on all the news that comes in from India. And there's a ghastly video that's all over the internet, on social media, on Twitter, on Facebook. Two women, and this is a video going back 2 months, but it surfaced yesterday. Two women, and it makes me crazy to even say this. In the state of Manipur, they were stripped of their clothes by hundreds of men, and they're being walked around, and there's a video, and they're being sexually molested. This is a 2-month-old video. The two women are Christians. The mob is Hindu. For more than 2 months, we heard the commissioner and we heard Professor, the special rapporteur, talk about the situation in Manipur. For 2 months, this violence has gone on in Manipur. And yet, the Indian government, India's prime minister, nobody has said a word about it. The prime minister has forget about bothering to even travel there, but the day that mass violence was going on, he was preparing to come to the United States. While the violence was going on in Manipur, he was right here at, addressing the joint session of Congress here, and then he went in the evening to a state dinner at the White House. One of the things that the American people do not understand, or probably they do, probably the people in the government do, but the common American people do not understand that because of the soft power that the United States has across the world, Who you think, who you treat, who you bring home to dinner is seen as your validation of that person. That is something America needs to understand. When you give a state dinner to Narendra Modi, he uses that to validate his atrocious rule in India. And that is what is happening. So if he goes to China, if he goes to Russia, nobody cares. China is not in the business of saying we care about human rights. They don't care. But America keeps talking about human rights, human rights, human rights, human rights. So if you are going to be the good guy in the room, you can't just talk the talk. You have to walk the talk. About 3 weeks before Mr. Modi came to the United States in the third week of June, about 6 of us were invited for a meeting with top officials at the National Security Council here, which is, of course, as you know, in the Eisenhower building, right next to the Oval Office. And we had about an hour of a meeting with some top officials there. And they started by asking, and who were we? We were a bunch of civil rights activists in Washington, D.C. And what did they say? They said, okay, come on, tell us. We would love to know from you, since Modi is visiting here, what's going on in India? What would you like to tell us? And so, of course, many of my colleagues, they spoke. They talked about, gave harrowing details about what's going on in India. And at the same time, and of course, they were taking notes and everything. When my turn came, I said to them, and I was very serious about it, and I said, look, thank you so much for having us here, but I am truly confused. What is it? What information can we, a group of civil rights activists with limited resources, what information can we bring to you that you as the United States government do not already know? You have consulates in India. You have a full embassy in India. You have the strength of the civil society, the news media, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Post. You have hundreds of officials in India. Why would you need us to come to you and give you information? What is it that we can bring you? There's nothing that you do not know already. Why are you asking us? Last week, Arundhati Roy, she is one of the best-known, public intellectuals in India. She won the Booker Prize for Literature. She's one of the best-known intellectuals from India. She's highly respected in America. She wrote an op-ed last week in the New York Times, and she said it has been said, and she writes that it has been said a lot of times that we need to speak truth to power. This is absolute rubbish. Power knows the truth already. The United States government, President Biden, the US Congress, the leaders of both political parties, they know what's going on in India. There's nothing that's hidden. But you are literally, not figuratively, literally, not only condoning the behavior of the Indian administration, but you are actually encouraging it to continue behaving the way it has been. And absolutely on cue, 3 days after Mr. Modi landed in India, after his visit to the United States last month, what does he do? He immediately goes to a public meeting and he says, we are going to bring something that in India is known as a uniform civil code. Now, what is a uniform civil code? Now, in America, we have one law for everybody. Of course, we have some laws different for the Native American people, some of those laws, reservations and all that. But broadly speaking, we have the same civil law for people in this country. Not so in India, not so in many countries of the world where, which are made of different ethnicities. And they have different rules. They have different laws governing succession, marriage, divorce, stuff like that. It was the promise of the Indian Constitution back in 1950 that all communities will have their separate laws. Now, only because they don't want the Christians and the Muslims and the indigenous people to have their own social cultural laws, they have been pushing for 70 years for something called a uniform civil code without any consultation with any community. And that's the first thing that Mr. Modi went back and announced that he's going to bring. Commissioner Curry, sir, we would like to urge Yusuf to take a look at this Uniform Civil Code debate. It's a very important debate. You need to look at it from the point of view of the communities that will be affected in India. That is fundamentally another way of curbing religious freedoms of the communities in India. What we need to completely understand is that the United States turning a blind eye to bad stuff going down in India is not going to help the United States. This is the last part of the argument that I want to make before all of you. one of the things we constantly hear, and we are also told, when we have meetings with officials from the United States Department of State, from the United States, even with the National Security Council, every time we meet with members of Congress, we hear that, well, China, we are opposed to China, we need to have, friends in the region, India is a friend, so on and so forth. Let me tell you something. India, like United States, is a union of states. In the US, there are 50 states. In India, there are 28 states. There were 29, but 5 years ago, Mr. Modi unilaterally, without consultation with the people of one state, which is Jammu and Kashmir, he stripped the autonomy of that state. He stripped that state of statehood. Imagine if this were to happen, if a US president were to unilaterally strip the statehood of Texas or statehood of Maryland or Virginia, That sort of thing he did, And one of the states is called Manipur. Now, India has a long border with China. In the last 4 years, there have been many clashes between Chinese and Indian militaries. China has been gobbling up Indian territory, right? And in Manipur, the state that I talked about at the beginning, where the mass violence has happened, is a border state with Myanmar, and Myanmar is currently completely a vassal state of the People's Republic of China. It does not advance the national security interests of the United States if there is internal hostility, social hostility inside India. India cannot be a reliable partner to the United States. That is an argument that more and more people are now beginning to understand. So I think this is important for the political process in America to understand. It is very myopic of the US politicians, US leaders to think that just because India is buying a lot of defense equipment from the United States, therefore it's going to be a reliable partner. That's not going to happen. We have the examples of Pakistan. Pakistan and United States were great partners in the 1980s. Now, Pakistan is American diplomats cannot even walk the streets of Pakistan without security. It's a hostile territory now for America. Likewise with Afghanistan. There's so many countries. So America needs to understand that it needs to side with democracy, with freedoms, with liberty in